Hey guys, it's Miles from Milesfit, and you're watching episode number 4 of the Ask Miles show, where I answer your health, fitness, lifestyle, and motivation questions. Happy Monday, everybody. It's a fresh new week, episode number 4. Flying through these babies, I'm telling you. Pumped up, super excited. We have another 3 awesome questions this week that we're going to jump into and we're going to dive into. So we're going to get into that stuff. Really exciting show, and we're going to dissect health and fitness. So let's get everything set up. We're going to look at those questions. So let's get everything organized. Okay. So give me a moment. Just getting this set up. Boom. All right, so the first question that we have for episode number 4 is, how do I stop binging at night? Great question. This is something that so many people suffer from, and it's actually one of those things that not a lot of people discuss. It's something that most people tend to keep to themselves and to keep in private, but it's definitely an important subject to discuss. Binging, late night binging specifically. So binging is something that I think everyone has done in some way, shape, or form at some time in their life. Depends on the circumstances. Having said that, I would say that the number one reason for late night binging is stress. Stress is the element that pushes us psychologically and emotionally into this zone where we feel like we need something to de-stress ourselves. Now, we can mitigate stress and deal with stress in a variety of ways. Some people smoke cigarettes, some people eat, some people exercise. There are many different ways that we can deal with stress. However, culturally, food seems to be the easiest, most simple, and acceptable way to be able to deal with stress. So let's take a sample scenario. You come home at the end of the day, you've had a long day, a stressful day, you have a lot of stress going on in your life, so you feel like you're in this emotional state that you just want to get out of. You feel trapped in terms of stress. So you reach for some food, and you reach for that food because when you eat the food, number one, it's a different activity, so it gets your mind off of the stress. Number two, when you eat food, especially sugary foods, you actually change your biochemistry. You actually change your mood. You change your neurotransmitters. So you actually get this high-like effect and this way to deal with the stress that you're experiencing. The problem is, though, when you binge, we're not talking a couple hundred calories. Very often when people binge, we're going into the 500, 750, 1,000 plus calories, because when the floodgates open, they tend to really open and everything just comes pouring out. So that late night binging is a very common thing. And the question was, how do I stop late night binging? Well, in a perfect world, whatever would be causing your stress, be that the type of day that you have or have had rather, the life situation that you're in, relationships, friends, stuff like that. If that's what's causing you the stress, obviously to deal with the cause will help remove that from your life and in turn mitigate binging, or at least work towards mitigating that because you're removing the cause of the stress. However, it's not always feasible and practical to be able to immediately remove the stressors of our life. So with that being the case, we want to find some viable solutions that we can implement and integrate immediately. Now, when we binge at night, most people reach for sugary treats. So people aren't reaching for steak and Brussels sprouts, let's face it. We're tending to reach for cookies, ice cream, snacks, all these sugary carbohydrate dominant foods. And I mentioned in a previous episode that one of the reasons we reach for sweet things is because when we consume sugary foods and we get glucose into our bloodstream and we release insulin to balance our blood sugar levels, the release of insulin will down-regulate stress hormones. So as I've mentioned before, that desire to consume sugary foods is a very natural and innate desire that we have within us to balance our biochemistry. The only problem is that it's going to result in gaining weight and negatively impacting and changing our body composition and our physique, which is a no-no. We don't want to do that. We want to stay healthy. We want to stay strong. So going back to the question of how do I stop binging at night? So let's move aside addressing the root cause of stress and let's look instead at some strategies you can do. So number one is not to keep in your home or your apartment or wherever it is you live tons of sweet and sugary foods. That is literally setting yourself up to fail. If you have a pantry packed with cookies and chocolate bars and a freezer packed with ice cream and stuff like that, if the environment contains those bad foods, it's going to be so easy to pig out on those things because they're right there at your disposal and literally right in your face. So step number one would be to remove those things from your home or wherever it is you live to not be susceptible to indulging in those things. So that would be one strategy. A second strategy, okay, would be to first consume a meal that's rich in fiber, rich in protein, and rich in healthy fats. So when you get home at the end of the day, rather than reaching for those things first, because they tend to come after supper, after we've already eaten something, you want to make sure to have a good sized supper, rich in fiber, rich in protein, and rich in healthy fats. So an example could be, for example, a fillet of pork, oven roasted, with a nice big leafy green salad with some balsamic vinegar. So that'll be a nice sized meal, lots of fiber, lots of vitamins, minerals, protein, and healthy fats. And that meal will help satisfy you and keep you full to reduce the likelihood of wanting to crave those things later. Because like I said, most of those cravings and that evening binging comes later. So if you have a good sized supper, like I said, rich in protein, fiber, and healthy fats, that will help fill you up and reduce the likelihood of reaching for those sugary foods. So number one was to remove the stuff from your home. That's a strategy. Number two would be to have a good sized supper, rich in protein, healthy fats, and fiber. And number three, I've mentioned this before in previous videos, would be to, when you have that urge, that sensation to consume those foods that you know aren't good for you and they're in your home, you definitely want to go right away and brush your teeth, chew some gum, get that minty fresh sensation on your palate, and be able to change that profile so that you're not craving any of those bad or negative foods. But definitely the late night stress eating is something that's challenging. It doesn't happen every single night per se, and it's not something that we can fix immediately. However, it is something that we have to work on. Otherwise, we're going to be in a perpetual negative cycle of dismantling our body composition and pushing us into an inflamed state and increasing the fat stores of our body. So hopefully that information was useful. Those are 3 practical, tangible, and concrete strategies that you can use to deal with stress eating at night and that binging type of sensation. Question number 2. All right, next question. Super excited. So is it okay to have carbs with supper? Great question. So usually when we want to have carbohydrates, it's in the evening. Yes, some people like to have their carbs in the morning, oatmeal, toast, stuff like that, but most people really want to have their carbs with supper. It's one of the ways in which we grew up. We're accustomed to having, a piece of protein, some carbs, and a vegetable with our supper meal. And now that carbs have been demonized and everyone's trying to avoid carbs and stay away, Carbs are no longer existent. People are depriving themselves, people are restricting themselves, and people want to know, can I have carbs with supper? Is it going to make me fat? Is it going to upset my biochemistry? Well, here's the thing. Firstly, how much carbs? If you're going to have 3 cups of rice or a huge bowl of pasta in the evening, that's probably not the best idea. So having said that, having some carbs in the evening is completely fine. No problem with that whatsoever. You just want to manage your portions. So for example, for a male, as an example, you could have a cup of brown rice, or a cup and a little bit, like a cup and a quarter. For a female, you could have half a cup to 3/4 a cup of brown rice. So that would be an example of a serving, a regular serving of carbohydrates that you could consume in supper. So it's not that you can't have carbohydrates, it's that you have to control your portions. You can't go out of control. And as a matter of fact, carbohydrates release serotonin in the body, which actually helps calm your nervous system down and does facilitate and help with sleep. So with that said, having some carbohydrates in the evening can help those who might have some sleep challenges and some sleep difficulties. Now, most people are avoiding carbs completely, like I said, because people fear carbohydrates, that they're going to make us fat. But a regular and normal portion and serving of carbohydrates with supper is completely acceptable and fine. Low carb diets, we're going to talk about diets in a moment, but low carb diets are the craze right now. Like I said, carbs have been demonized. Everyone's staying away from carbs. Everybody's just eating protein and fat. It's okay to have carbohydrates. You need carbohydrates. As a matter of fact, the primary source of fuel of the human body is glucose, i.e. carbohydrates. Your body runs on glucose. Carbs are not the devil. That's really one of the themes I'm trying to hammer home in these videos. People are so scared of carbohydrates. People are freaking out about bread and pasta and rice. It's okay to eat those things. It's okay. Just how much and when. Those are things we have to consider. But one of the ways that a lot of people operate, it's either no carbs or all carbs, or a little bit or a lot. So there's no kind of middle ground. People are going to extremes, none or everything. Well, it's in either of those zones that you run into problems, because when you're in the no carb zone and you feel deprived and you feel restricted, what do you think is going to happen? Your willpower threshold at one point will be hit. And once you hit that willpower threshold of, staving off carbohydrates and staying away from them, well, let me tell you, what's going to happen is you're going to eat carbs and you're going to eat a lot of them. And what's going to happen after that, you're going to feel horrible, you're going to feel guilty, and that's going to create this perpetual cycle of dieting, restricting, depriving, only to hit that threshold. And when you hit that threshold, boom, Carb City. That's a problem. Okay, so that's one extreme, no carbs. The other extreme would be consuming carbs all of the time. And if you're doing that and your metabolism and your physiology is not congruent with that type of macronutrient consumption level, i.e. eating a lot of carbs, you're going to put on lots and lots of fat. Think of carbohydrates as a vehicle for energy. And if you're a sedentary person who's not moving a lot or exercising a lot, all of those extra and excess carbohydrates will easily be converted to fat in your body. And the more fat you have on your body, the more inflammation you'll have in your body, and the more you'll dysregulate your biochemistry. Okay, so that's the other extreme. The middle ground is the secret and sacred territory. But the middle ground, the shades of gray, is the challenging zone, because human beings are very black or white, nothing or everything. And the middle ground or gray zone is challenging because there's options and there's possibilities. And we become almost lost in the gray zone because we're not sure. Am I having too much carbs? Am I not having enough carbs? What should I do? So firstly, if you say to yourself, carbs are okay, I can eat carbs. if you have that type of energy and association to carbohydrates, your relationship with carbohydrates will completely and totally change. That's number one. Number two is to have a little bit of carbohydrates every day. A serving with your main meals is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Carbohydrates are good for you. Like I said, the body runs on glucose. You need carbohydrates. How much is a different story, right? We're not talking about all or zero. We're talking about that gray zone, that middle ground, that balanced territory. So I always suggest to people that a little period of removing carbohydrates to balance your physiology, resensitize insulin receptor sites, and balance your biochemistry could be a great thing. But you definitely want to reintegrate carbohydrates, especially if you're someone who moves, who exercises. Those extra carbohydrates will help you, but moderation is key. So the first thing, like I mentioned, is not to have that bad relationship with carbohydrates. Say it's okay to eat carbohydrates. Moderation, and that's pretty much it. So going back to, can you have carbs at night? Absolutely, 100%. And for some people, like I said, it will really help with sleep and help with balancing out your hormones and giving you the energy the next day to be able to get stuff done. But the devil is in the dose. Quantity matters. How much makes the biggest difference? So just to reiterate an example, a serving about the size of your fist, which is equal to about a cup, would be an average serving. So I said for females, for example, half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of brown rice, or for a male, a full cup to a cup and a quarter of brown rice. That would be an example, just to give you something concrete and tangible that you can associate to a serving, right? Obviously it can vary from person to person, but at least we're in the ballpark having that conversation about what's realistic in terms of the size of the carbs you'd be consuming with a meal at supper time. All right, let's look at the third question. So, how can I stay motivated to stick to a diet? Great question. Motivation in life is the most challenging thing. We're constantly fighting to have motivation to get stuff done. The reality is we have a threshold of motivation, and every day we actually apply levels of motivation to different things in our life. We apply motivation to our dreams and goals. We apply motivation to our job and career. We apply motivation to our relationships and partnerships. We apply motivation to our exercise routine and nutrition planning. So we have that threshold of motivation. There's only so much motivation to go around. And a lot of the environment has demands on us, and that depletes our motivation levels very easy. And when it comes to sticking to a diet, most people have a negative association to whatever diet it is they're following. So the word diet has the word die in it. As you know, that's not good. And people have that association to diets, that if you do it, you feel like you're dying, you're struggling, it's a hassle, it's this big deal, and that's why we have no motivation. If you're doing something that you absolutely hate, you're not going to be able to find the motivation. Motivation is really kind of a myth in a sense, because to find motivation for stuff that you don't like is pretty much impossible. You can have a vision of the goal, the outcome, what you're trying to reach and achieve. And that vision of a compelling future can give you motivation to make it through the tough and challenging times. But by no means does that imply that it's going to be easy, that it's going to be simple, that it's going to be downhill. No way. You're still going to have to mentally fight through that. So one of the secrets to having motivation on a diet is firstly to ditch the word diet. That's number one. Number two is to follow some type of nutritional regime where you actually like the foods you're consuming. A routine where you don't say all of these foods are bad and I can't consume them, and all of these foods are good and I can consume them. If you have that kind of polar opposite, good foods and bad foods, already you're setting yourself up to fail with a negative association to food, because you've just labeled certain things good and certain things bad. Why is that bad? Well, because the things that are bad for you if you have cravings for them or you want to consume them, you're going to have this inner battle and this inner psychological fight saying, oh, I want them, but the other part of you saying, oh, I shouldn't have them. And then you're going to have this inner conflict and clash, which is going to drive you bonkers. So instead of putting these foods in this bad category, don't do that. Food is food. Everything can be consumed, everything, in moderation. It's all about balance. It's all about finding that happy medium, that middle ground of consuming some things that aren't micro and macronutrient rich some of the time. So for example, let's say you like cookies. Don't deprive yourself of cookies if you like cookies. If you genuinely like cookies, have some cookies. Should you eat them every day, all the time, 7 days a week, every month? Of course not. So that's where moderation comes into the equation. You have to be able to regulate those foods, but don't label them as bad. Food is food. It's okay to eat those things that some people call bad foods. It's just food. So moderation is key. That's really important to realize. One of the things I've seen working with people with their nutrition is that there is an unhealthy relationship with food. It's completely normal. We've been conditioned by society. We've been conditioned by all of the marketing. We've been conditioned by all of the information through all media and social platforms. And we have in our head foods we consider good and foods we consider bad. And both of those pull on us in different directions and drive us bananas. And because of that, we go in this yo-yo dieting where we're good for a certain period of time and then we crash. Then we regroup and recalibrate and then we're good and then we crash. And it's this perpetual state of yo-yo dieting that traps and immobilizes us and nothing actually improves. When you take out your physique and your body composition and your fat stores 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, the research is very clear and the data is very evident. Most people don't get the results they want because that perpetual state of yo-yoing, of trying to be perfect and good and only eat good foods versus the times where we fall off the wagon and totally screw things up, that situation traps us. So how do we get out of that? Well, I already mentioned that. The way we get out of that is by not associating foods as good or bad, just considering that foods are food. Some have more fiber, macronutrients, micronutrients. Some have less processed stuff in them. So it's about categorizing things, but not using the word bad or it's bad for me or I have to avoid it. Anytime you say I have to avoid something or I cannot have something, you're trapped. You're done. Stick a fork in you, you are done. Because that association always, 100% of the time, definitively comes back to haunt you and trip you up. 10 times out of 10. Willpower will only get you so far. So rather than using your mind to try and create a false reality about food, use your mind and psychology to cultivate a better relationship with food, and that new and improved relationship with food will empower you. And when that happens, yo-yo dieting, feeling deprived, feeling restricted, those sensations will leave your body. You'll start feeling amazing and you'll start getting results because you won't be on that wacky roller coaster ride anymore. So, how can I stay motivated when I'm on a diet? A, get rid of the word diet. Call it a nutritional plan, a nutritional regime, a nutritional system. So removing that word diet will also make you feel a lot better. How can I stay motivated on the plan? Don't demonize foods. Don't classify foods as bad. Food is food. Everything in moderation. If you like things, have them. But can you have them every day? Probably not. Once a week? Depends on the person. Once every couple of weeks? Probably. So it's about finding those middle grounds. That's the key territory. That's where the magic happens. Your relationship with food changes everything. Okay, so hopefully you found that information really useful. So I just want to summarize here those 3 key questions we looked at. So number 1 was, how do I stop binging at night, aka stress eating? In a perfect world, top way to do that would be to eliminate the stress, eliminate the cause. Go to the source, find the etiology, and get rid of it. So that could be finances, career, relationships, etc., etc., etc. Easier said than done. Easier said than done. Other strategies for dealing with binging at night is to, when you get home, have a good supper rich in protein, healthy fat, and fiber. That'll keep you full and reduce the likelihood of consuming sugary foods. Another strategy, if you really feel compelled to eat sugary and sweet foods, get the stuff out of your home. Remove it, all of it. Don't even keep it near you. We're so susceptible to the environment and those environmental triggers and cues. If you have in your pantry cookies and chocolates and all of these things, the willpower battle is going to be hardcore. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be really tough. Set yourself up to win. Optimize the environment. Get rid of that stuff. And the third tip that I gave was really to, if you feel that craving coming on, go and brush your teeth. Chew some gum. Get that minty fresh sensation on your palate, in your mouth, and the likelihood of wanting to consume those sugary and sweet foods and to binge and stress eat will go down. You'll feel less inclined to do that type of stuff. So those are really three of the key strategies when it comes to stress eating and late night binging. The second question was, is it okay to have carbs with supper? Yes, carbs are not the devil. It's okay to have carbohydrates. Carbs are your friend. You can have rice, you can have pasta, you can have sweet potato. How much? That's where it matters. Not a huge serving if you're a sedentary individual or someone who doesn't really work out that much. If you work out a lot, you can have more. But yes, it's okay to have carbs with supper. And for a lot of people, if they have a serving of carbs with supper, it will release serotonin and it will help with sleep, and you'll feel more rested in the morning because of that better quality sleep as well. And the final question, how do I stay motivated on a diet? A, don't call it a diet. B, don't classify foods as good or bad. Food is food. Enjoy it. Enjoy life. Just don't eat things that are highly processed and contain very small quantities of micronutrients and antioxidants and those types of things in mass quantities. The things that people would classify as bad foods, okay, you can have. Just not all the time, every day. You have to be smart about those things. But just allowing yourself to have those foods is tremendous. Just having that positive relationship with the food changes your life, let me tell you. Because personally, myself, I've had a few moments in my life. I used to weigh 275 pounds. I used to weigh 275 pounds. Right now, I weigh about 175 pounds. I am literally 100 pounds lighter than I used to be. So let's just say, to keep things simple, that I myself have had struggles with food. I myself have had challenges with food. So I've been through this personally, and all of these little tips and details and ideas and things that I'm sharing with you not only stem from my personal experience, but also the experience of working with clients, helping them balance their life, their lifestyles, their nutrition, their physiology, biochemistry, hormones, and all of that good stuff. There are solutions. And if what you're doing is not working, change your approach. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. The same thing will yield the same result. If you're not getting the result you want, change your approach. Do something different. Step outside of your comfort zone. Expand your mind. Look outside of the typical box where people are isolated in. There, in that territory, you'll find the answers and the solutions. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that information. I hope you enjoyed this episode number 4 of the Ask Miles Show. As I mentioned, these episodes are going to be coming at you weekly. So guys, it's Monday. It's a fresh new week. Go out there, be motivated, dominate, and I will catch you at episode number 5. Thanks guys. Have an awesome day.